The morning air at Fort Ironvale carried the steady hum of engines and the faint echo of boots on pavement, the kind of background noise that belonged to military life and never really stopped, amidst the rhythm of soldiers moving in formation and mechanics shouting across hangars. One figure moved slowly and quietly, blending into the scenery like a forgotten shadow. Her name was Sophia, 52 years old, with silver streaks tied back in a plain ponytail, her frame lean but unremarkable beneath the loose uniform of a cleaning contractor. For 15 years, she had lived on this base, pushing a mop and hauling a bucket from building to building, her presence so ordinary that no one truly saw her. They called her Sophie sometimes, or even Ma, but never paused to ask who she really was. That was the way she liked it. Sophia had perfected invisibility, not the kind that came from technology or science, but the kind that came from living small, from speaking little, from lowering her eyes at the right moment and never drawing attention. She had become part of the background, as forgettable as the humming generators and the distant chop of helicopters that passed overhead. Each day began at the same hour. She arrived before sunrise, the sky still painted with gray and faint orange, and entered the hangars with her cart. The smell of grease and iron filled the air. Soldiers joked, shouted, cursed, and carried on as she cleaned around them. Her hands moved with practiced rhythm, mopping, scrubbing, wiping down the tools and equipment they touched. No one guessed that behind those calm movements lived a storm she had hidden for years. Sophia often wondered what it would feel like to live freely, to reveal what she truly was. Yet fear kept her bound. She had survived something no one else survived, a program whispered about only in secret corridors, a project that promised to turn volunteers into more than human. What the program had really delivered was death. Every subject lost except her. Officially she was gone too, buried by the system that created her, erased from records, hidden under the mask of a simple civilian worker. Sophia told herself the disguise was safety. Safety for her and for those around her. The power she carried was nothing she asked for, and every day she chose not to use it, to keep it locked inside. On that morning, the hangar floor stretched like an ocean of gray concrete. Armored vehicles lined up in rows as soldiers prepared for their inspection drill. Sergeant Robert, broad-shouldered and hard-eyed from years in the desert, barked orders across the space. He reminded them that every bolt and tire mattered, because when lives depended on machines, there was no room for error. The soldiers listened, their voices echoing against the high metal walls as they spread out to begin. Sophia placed her cart near the far wall and began her routine. From where she worked, she saw a young recruit, barely 19. Moving eagerly from one task to another, he checked tire pressure with almost too much energy, scribbled notes with perfect neatness, and glanced nervously at his superiors. His name was Michael, and he carried himself with the desperate determination of someone about to deploy for the first time. She studied him in silence, remembering her own youth before everything changed. Her life had become a cycle of repetition, an endless movie that played frame after frame with no real variation. Yet she found comfort in it. Routine kept her hidden. Routine made her human. But hidden power is restless, and sometimes the world conspires to test the walls we build around ourselves. Sophia's eyes drifted across the hangar to where mechanics struggled with a hydraulic jack under one of the massive Humvees. The vehicle weighed more than 10,000 pounds even without cargo, yet the man worked hastily, cutting corners as grease stained his uniform. He shouted for help, his frustration filling the space. Several soldiers gathered to assist, each of them arguing about the best way to stabilize the machine. Sophia paused in her mopping, her gaze narrowing. She could see something the others could not, the angle of the supports, the pressure in the system, the way the steel frame leaned too far to one side. Years of suppressed training whispered to her that danger was coming, that one wrong shift would be enough to bring disaster. She gripped the handle of her mop tighter, torn between remaining invisible and stepping forward. A cleaner had no right to speak, no authority to tell soldiers how to do their work. Yet her instincts gnawed at her, warning of catastrophe. The base commander, Captain John, entered just as the group crowded around the unstable vehicle. His presence carried weight. The air thickened as soldiers straightened their posture and tried to appear competent. John's eyes scanned the situation, professional and sharp. But even his experience missed the fine details Sophia saw. The hydraulic system was bleeding slowly, each hiss of air a countdown she alone could hear. She stayed quiet, pressing her mop against the floor, forcing herself to blend back into the silence of her role. Still, her body leaned slightly forward, her muscles tense, ready to move if the moment demanded it. 15 years she had hidden. 15 years she had been the invisible woman who swept floors and polished metal. 15 years she had resisted the weight of her own secret. That morning the secret was restless, and deep inside Sophia already knew the time of hiding was slipping away. The hangar was alive with noise, boots striking the floor in steady rhythms, metal tools clanging, the deep murmur of engines being tested. Soldiers moved between the vehicles with practiced coordination, their voices echoing up toward the high steel ceiling. Above them, fluorescent lights cast a harsh white glow that reflected off the polished armor of the machines. Sophia pushed her mop across the wide floor, the sound faint compared to the shouts of Sergeant Robert as he gave sharp instructions. He demanded thoroughness, checking every part of every machine, reminding the soldiers that their lives would one day depend on the bolts they tightened today. His tone was fierce, his eyes narrowed, his voice filling every corner of the cavernous hangar. The young recruit, Michael, was determined to impress, crouching low to examine tires, moving quickly to check fluids, writing down each result with such care that it almost looked ceremonial. His uniform was crisp, his movement sharp, but Sophia could see the nervous energy behind his eagerness. He was young, about to leave for his first deployment, and the weight of that future clung to him, though he tried to hide it. Sophia leaned on her mop for a moment and spoke just loud enough for him to hear. "Stay sharp when you leave here. Trust your equipment. It can keep you alive if you respect it." Michael looked at her in surprise, not expecting the cleaning woman to speak. For an instant his youthful bravado faltered, and he nodded quickly before returning to his task. Across the hangar, the mechanic, Corporal Williams, struggled with a hydraulic jack under one of the heavier Humvees. Sweat streaked his forehead, his uniform stained with oil. He was known for shortcuts, for impatience, and that impatience showed now as he barked for help. The machine rested at an odd angle, heavy steel groaning faintly as pressure leaked through the system. Two soldiers moved in to assist, adjusting jacks and shouting over each other. Their voices overlapped in a rising wave of frustration. The massive vehicle, 12,000 pounds of steel and armor, stood like a beast waiting to collapse. Captain John approached, his boots striking sharp against the floor. His presence calmed the noise. The soldiers straightened their backs. Their tones became sharper, more professional. He asked for a report, his voice calm but edged with command. Williams replied quickly, insisting that the vehicle was stable, that adjustments were nearly complete. But Sophia could see the truth. She had been trained once to notice the smallest cracks in systems, to sense instability before it revealed itself. And everything in her told her that the weight distribution was wrong, the angle too dangerous, the supports already carrying more than they should. She knew it would not hold, not for long. Her instincts told her to step forward, to warn them, but she froze, reminding herself of the rules she had lived by for 15 years, rules that said she must stay invisible, must not reveal her knowledge or her strength. A cleaning woman did not give technical advice to soldiers. A cleaning woman did not interfere. Then Michael moved closer to the scene, curiosity pulling him in. He watched as Williams ordered another adjustment. The young soldier was eager to help, eager to prove himself. He offered to crawl beneath the machine and shift one of the manual jacks closer to the center. Williams, too desperate for speed, agreed. His voice rang out, approving the idea, urging him to hurry. Sophia's chest tightened. She could see the danger clearer than anyone. She could see the exact spot where the weight would drop if the hydraulics failed. And Michael was about to put himself there. She opened her mouth before she could stop herself, suggesting that someone check the pressure readings again. Her voice cut through the air, unfamiliar in that space, and heads turned toward her. For a moment there was silence. Soldiers exchanged glances. Captain John raised an eyebrow at the cleaner who dared to speak. He gave a polite nod and told her that the situation was under control. Sophia quickly stepped back, regretting that she had broken her own law of invisibility. But her body refused to relax, every muscle tense, every nerve alert. Michael crawled beneath the Humvee, his legs visible from where Sophia stood. He worked with determination, twisting the jack with focus, oblivious to the danger above him. A hiss cut through the noise, sharp and sinister, escaping fluid streaming from the hydraulic system. Williams brushed it off as normal release, but Sophia knew better. It was the hiss of failure, the final warning before collapse. She began to count in her head, 10 seconds, 9, 8, each heartbeat pounding louder. The hiss grew, the machine trembled, the soldiers shouted warnings, but Michael was still beneath it, focused, unaware. 7, 6, 5, the floor seemed to shake with the strain. For 3, the supports shifted, metal groaned. 2, and then the vehicle dropped. The crash was like thunder trapped inside the walls. 12,000 pounds of steel slamming against concrete. The air shook with the impact. Michael's scream pierced through the hangar as the frame pinned his legs. The shouts of soldiers rose in chaos. A medic was called. Hands scrambled for tools and jacks. Sophia did not think. Her body moved before her mind could stop it. 15 years of hiding collapsed in a single instant. She ran forward, her eyes locked on the boy trapped beneath the machine. She saw angles, leverage, weight distribution, calculations flashing in her head like lightning. She saw not just the problem, but the exact way to solve it. The soldiers shouted at her to step back, to wait for equipment. But Sophia could see the truth. By the time they rolled in cranes or heavy tools, Michael might be gone. The decision she had feared for so long had come, and she knew she could not run from it any longer. The silence after the crash lasted only a breath. Then the hangar erupted into chaos. Soldiers rushed forward. Voices collided in panic. Shouts for equipment and orders blending into a storm. The Humvee sat heavy on the floor, its steel frame crushing down on Michael's legs. The young recruit's face twisted with pain, his breath sharp and ragged as he tried to hold back another scream. Captain John barked commands, his voice steady though urgency pulsed beneath it. Medics sprinted forward. Corporal Williams fumbled with jacks. Others ran to find cutting gear, but every second stretched too long. Every second that weight pressed down on Michael threatened to end his future before it began. Sophia dropped to her knees beside the vehicle, her hands brushing over the steel, feeling the vibration of pressure running through it. Her mind moved into an old rhythm she thought she had buried forever. Angles, stress points, leverage, all measured in an instant. She knew exactly how much force was needed, and she knew no jack in this hangar could provide it quickly enough. Williams shouted at her to move away, his tone high with stress. The captain told her to stand back and wait for the crane, but their words washed over her without weight. She could hear only Michael's weak voice, a faint cry that he was still conscious, that he could not feel his legs. 15 years of silence fell away, 15 years of sweeping floors, keeping her head low, pretending to be nothing more than a shadow. All of it cracked in that moment. She was not just Sophia the cleaner. She was something else, something the world had once tried to erase. Her palms pressed firmly under the edge of the Humvee. She closed her eyes for the briefest second and drew on the strength she had hidden. A reservoir she had kept sealed for so long that unleashing it felt both terrifying and natural. Muscles that had seemed ordinary now surged with power. Neural pathways that had been dormant lit up like fire. Her body awakened. The steel groaned. The floor trembled. The vehicle began to rise. At first, the soldiers thought they were seeing wrong. The impossible breaking through the ordinary. A small-framed woman in a loose uniform lifting 12,000 pounds of armored steel with her bare hands. The machine rose slow but steady, the air heavy with disbelief. All around her the noise fell silent, shock stealing the voices from every throat. Michael scrambled, his body dragging free, his arms clawing the ground as he pulled himself out, his face contorted with pain, but his eyes wide with wonder, his legs bruised but not broken. Luck sparing him from worse, he was pulled away by medics who rushed to check his injuries. Sophia held the vehicle aloft a moment longer, her arms steady, her breathing calm, not a flicker of strain across her face. Then with careful control, she lowered it back to the concrete, easing it down until it rested without a crash. Her hands released, her body relaxed. She stood slowly, brushed dust from her uniform, and walked back toward her cart as if she had done nothing more unusual than wipe a floor. The hangar was frozen. 500 soldiers stared at her in silence, their eyes wide, their minds struggling to piece together what they had witnessed. Captain John was the first to move, stepping closer, his eyes fixed on her with a mix of awe and suspicion. He asked her what she had done, his voice almost a whisper now. But Sophia did not answer. She picked up her mop, dipped it into the bucket, and pressed it against the floor. The sound of water on concrete echoed in the silence. Whispers spread among the soldiers. A mechanic muttered that it had been impossible. Another swore he had never seen anything like it in 20 years of service. Some crossed themselves, as if warding off something beyond human. Others simply stared, their mouths half open. Michael, lying on a stretcher as the medics worked, turned his head to look at her, confusion mixing with gratitude. His life had been saved by hands that should never have been able to move that kind of weight. His voice was weak, but carried across the hangar as he thanked her. As he asked how, his words cracked the silence, and others nodded, echoing the question in their minds. Colonel Harrison entered then, silver hair, stern gaze, his authority filling the space at once. He had already heard fragments of what happened. He demanded a report, and Captain John explained, halting, uncertain. His eyes kept flicking toward Sophia, as though repeating what he had seen would somehow make it less impossible. The colonel looked at her, really looked at her, not as a cleaner, not as a shadow, but as something unknown. He asked her directly how she had lifted the vehicle. She met his gaze, her eyes calm but tired. She said only that sometimes jobs required things we would rather not do. Her words vague, but the weight behind them undeniable. Murmurs rippled through the hangar. The soldiers waited for answers, but none came. For the first time in 15 years, Sophia had revealed the truth hidden inside her, though not in words but in action, and she knew there would be no returning to silence now. She had saved Michael, she had torn away her mask, and she had shown the world that the woman with the mop was something far more. The hangar did not return to normal that day. The air felt different, charged with a story that would never be forgotten. Each soldier carried away the image of a woman lifting steel with her bare hands, and each of them knew that nothing at Fort Iron Vale would ever be the same again. The hangar remained heavy with silence long after the Humvee was lowered back to the floor. Soldiers exchanged glances, some fearful, some curious, none able to forget the sight of a woman lifting steel that weighed more than 6 tons. For years they had walked past Sophia without a second thought, and now every eye followed her as she moved with calm steps, mop in hand, as though nothing extraordinary had occurred. Colonel Harrison's gaze never left her. He was a man trained to read truth in faces, to measure tone and body language for signs of deception, and what he saw in Sophia unsettled him more than the impossible act itself. She was not panicked, not trembling, not defensive. She was steady, as though this moment had been waiting for her all along. Captain John reported the events, his words faltering. He described the hydraulic failure, the trapped recruit, and the intervention that defied all reason. His voice carried the weight of disbelief, yet his discipline forced him to recount the facts as they happened. When he finished, the colonel looked at Sophia and asked again how she had done it. She paused, setting her mop aside, her eyes lifting to meet his. Her voice carried not pride, but exhaustion. She said that sometimes people were forced to do things they would rather avoid, and sometimes strength revealed itself when there was no other choice. Her answer only deepened the mystery. The soldiers leaned closer, listening, waiting. Michael, still resting on a stretcher nearby, his legs wrapped and his face pale, called out to her. His words reached every corner of the hangar. He asked why she had hidden such power. He told her she had saved his life, and that alone proved she was nothing to fear. Sophia's lips curved into the faintest smile, her first in years. She looked at the boy and replied that power without control was dangerous, that the people who had given her this strength had not trusted her to keep it under restraint. They had been afraid, and perhaps they were right. The colonel's expression shifted, his eyes betrayed recognition. He had heard rumors long buried, whispers of a classified project that had promised miracles but delivered only graves. He spoke the words carefully, as though testing her, asking if she had been part of something called the Titan program. The name fell like a stone into still water. Soldiers glanced at one another, curiosity sharp in their faces. Some had heard of it in fragments, ghost stories of experiments that had ended in silence. Officially, it had never existed. Officially, all who took part had died. Sophia stood straighter, her frame small yet commanding in the vast hangar. She said yes, she had been the last subject of that program. 15 years ago, she had been meant to die like all the others. Yet something had gone wrong, or perhaps right, and she had lived. They erased her name, buried her existence, and left her to vanish. She chose instead to disappear in plain sight, trading the life of a soldier for the life of a cleaner. Her words rolled through the hangar like thunder. The soldiers listened, not moving, not speaking, absorbing the truth that their cleaning lady had been a hidden survivor of a secret meant never to reach the light. She described the program in fragments, enhancements that pushed the body beyond its natural limits, strength 50 times greater than human, reflexes sharp enough to dodge bullets, speed to rival machines. But every subject before her had died under the strain, their bodies unable to hold the changes. Only she had endured, and she had lived with the weight of that survival every day since. Captain John asked why she had stayed silent, why she had lived among them without ever revealing her nature. Sophia's gaze swept across the faces gathered, her eyes weary but steady. She said she had tried to live as a normal woman, to believe she was still human. For years she told herself she was just Sophia the cleaner, that if she kept her head down and her hands busy, the world would never know and she could remain safe. But watching a boy crushed beneath steel, knowing she had the power to save him, she realized the mask no longer mattered. A normal life was a prison, and silence was nothing but fear. The colonel pressed her further, warning that she was revealing classified knowledge in front of those without clearance. She replied that classification no longer mattered. The program was gone, the subjects dead. She was the last remnant, and she was tired of carrying the secret alone. These soldiers deserved to know who had been sweeping their floors. They deserved to know the truth of the strength she had just used to save one of their own. The soldiers reacted with a strange mix. Some looked at her with awe, others with uncertainty, but most with quiet respect. They had seen her act not for glory, but for necessity. They understood sacrifice, they understood courage, and they knew she had chosen to break her silence not for herself, but for a 19-year-old recruit who would have died without her. Sergeant Robert asked her one final question. If she had lived with these abilities for 15 years, why reveal them now? Why not sooner? Sophia's answer came with a long pause. She said that every time she thought about using her strength, she remembered the faces of those who had died in the program, and she feared becoming something less than human. But today she understood that hiding served no one. Her strength had a purpose beyond fear. The colonel looked at her for a long moment. Weighing her words, he told her that her future would need to be discussed, that her revelation changed everything. He urged the soldiers to remain silent outside the hangar, to treat what they had seen as restricted. But Sophia shook her head, saying that secrets never stay buried, and that truth was already walking with every man and woman who had witnessed what she had done. The hangar exhaled as though releasing a breath it had held for hours. Soldiers slowly returned to their stations, but their eyes never stopped glancing toward her. Sophia picked up her mop again, dipping it into the bucket, and resumed her work, her hands steady, her mind heavy. She knew this was only the beginning, that the shadow she had built around herself had shattered, and that the world would soon come knocking for the woman who was never supposed to exist. The days that followed spread the story faster than any order to remain silent ever could. Soldiers who had witnessed the impossible carried whispers across Fort Ironvale, and soon the tale of the cleaner who lifted a Humvee began to grow. Some said she raised it with a single hand. Others claimed she had thrown it into the air. In truth, the act itself had been enough, but rumors made it larger still. Colonel Harrison summoned Sophia into his office. the air heavy with questions. He told her that higher authorities were already aware, that Washington would send their own to assess her. He explained that her choice to reveal herself had created a storm beyond the walls of the base, and that now she would need to decide whether to step into that storm or retreat once more into shadows. Sophia listened quietly, her gaze steady. For 15 years she had mopped floors and polished equipment while pretending to be powerless. Now the world had seen what she could do, and there was no turning back. She told him that she no longer wished to hide. She was tired of living small, tired of fearing what she was. She wanted to use her strength not for herself, but for those around her. Soon after, specialists arrived, scientists and officers, Dr. Emma Hawthorne among them. A woman sharp-eyed and relentless, she tested Sophia, measuring her strength, her speed, her reflexes, noting that the enhancements had not faded over time, but had grown stronger. Emma admitted she had never seen anything like it, and warned the colonel that Sophia might not yet have reached her full potential. The thought weighed heavily. Sophia had believed her abilities fixed, a burden she had learned to carry. But if she was still changing, still evolving, then the path ahead was even less certain. She accepted the truth with quiet resolve, telling them that whether her strength grew or not, her purpose remained, to protect, to lift when others were crushed, to step forward when fear told her to stay behind. Her resolve was tested sooner than expected. A storm swept across the region, winds tearing at the base. A medical helicopter fought to land, carrying injured soldiers from training accidents in the mountains. The machine bucked in the wind, one rotor failing, the pilot straining against forces too great. It lurched toward fuel tanks that would ignite in a single spark. Sophia did not hesitate. She ran across the tarmac, her body moving faster than any soldier had seen. The ground shook as the helicopter dropped, its heavy frame plummeting. Soldiers shouted in horror, believing they were about to watch comrades perish. But Sophia planted her feet, raised her arms, and caught the falling aircraft as though it were nothing more than a tumbling crate. The impact thundered through her bones, yet she held steady, lowering the helicopter slowly, guiding it to the ground. The injured were pulled free, medics rushing them away. The pilot looked down in disbelief, his voice breaking as he thanked her. Soldiers around the landing pad fell silent, their eyes wide. For the second time, they had seen her do what no human should be able to do. The story spread beyond Fort Ironvale, reaching newspapers, whispers in government halls, questions in the Pentagon. Soon Sophia stood in Washington, her body wrapped now in a uniform that bore a new rank. They called her Major Sophia, commissioning her into a special unit designed not for secrecy, but for service. Generals asked her to demonstrate. Her hands bent steel bars like twigs. Her feet carried her across open fields faster than any vehicle. Bullets fired near her missed as her body shifted in motions faster than the eye could track. The officials watched with faces caught between awe and unease, for what stood before them was not a weapon built by machines, but a woman shaped by choice and survival. Sophia told them she would serve, but only on her terms. She would not be caged, she would not be hidden again. Her strength was meant for rescue, for protection, not destruction. The generals exchanged uneasy glances, but even they could not deny that her actions had already saved lives that day in the hangar and again on the storm-swept landing pad. Back at Fort Ironvale, the soldiers no longer saw her as just the cleaner. They greeted her with nods of respect, with quiet words of thanks. Young Michael, the recruit whose life she had saved, often walked beside her, telling her that she had changed how he understood courage. He said he once thought bravery was charging in a fire, but now he saw that true courage was using whatever gift one had to keep others alive, even when it meant standing apart. Sophia carried those words with her. For years she had believed her survival of the program was a curse, but now she began to see it as a calling. She was not meant to hide, not meant to sweep floors while the world bled. She was meant to stand where others could not, to catch what others could not hold. In the months that followed, Task Force Guardian was born, a unit shaped around her unique abilities. Its missions ranged from disaster relief to dangerous rescues. Sophia stood at the heart of it, guiding with both strength and humility. She was no longer invisible, No longer just a shadow moving with a mop and bucket, she had become a symbol, proof that power did not have to corrupt, proof that even the most extraordinary gifts could be wielded with compassion. The soldiers told her story, passing it down. The tale of the woman who lifted a Humvee, who caught a helicopter, who stepped out of hiding to protect them. It spread across bases, across units, across generations. It reminded them all that true strength was not in destruction, but in lifting others, not in domination, but in service. Sophia walked the halls of Fort Iron Vale still, her steps steady, her head high. She was no longer afraid of what she was. She had stopped hiding. She had embraced the truth that strength, no matter how extraordinary, found its highest purpose in protecting those who could not protect themselves. And in that truth, she had finally found peace, not as a weapon, not as an experiment, but as a guardian.